It was the heat that always drew the line between life and death on the Great Plains. The sun, a brutal, unforgiving eye in the endless blue sky, scorched the very air, turning the savanna grass into brittle gold. In this place of epic scale and savage beauty, survival was a negotiation, and one tiny creature had lost all leverage. He was alone, utterly and completely alone in a landscape that demanded strength and unforgiving competence. Hidden from the relentless gaze of the sky, tucked deep into the shadow of a massive granite outcrop, lay a secret. This rock, worn smooth by centuries of wind and sand, offered the only respite for a lion cub barely larger than a house cat. His name, though he had none, yet might as well have been Leo, for he was the very definition of a tiny king, dethroned before he could even open his eyes. But Leo was different. He was blind. His eyes, a soft, clouded blue, saw only shades of nothingness. They were beautiful, but tragically useless, condemning him to a world perceived only through trembling whiskers and the terrifying cacophony of the wild. He was lost. His mother, the powerful lioness that should have been his shield, had vanished. The last thing Leo remembered was her warm, comforting scent. And then a sudden, violent noise, a panicked flight, and now nothing but the rough, cold stone beneath his belly. This granite prison was all he knew. It smelled faintly of minerals and dry moss, a poor substitute for the rich, reassuring scent of his pride. He was born into the heart of a great dynasty, but now he was an orphan, cast out by a stroke of misfortune and the cruel lottery of genetics. Leo's whiskers were his eyes, twitching constantly, desperately trying to map the chaotic world around him. He could feel the slight vibrations in the earth, a heavy footfall, the skitter of a lizard, the distant rumble of thunder that promised but rarely delivered rain. Each vibration was a potential signal of life, but overwhelmingly a signal of death. He spent his earliest days pressed against the cold rock, trying to absorb its stillness, hoping to emulate its permanence. He wanted to be a part of the stone, not a soft, vulnerable piece of meat waiting for the inevitable. Hunger was a constant companion, a dull, aching throb that competed only with the cold dread that seeped into his bones as the sun began its slow, agonizing descent. His tiny body, built for future strength, was already running on fumes. He tried to cry out, to let the powerful lungs of his lineage do their work, but the sound was thin, reedy, and quickly swallowed by the immense space of the savanna. He knew instinctively that a loud noise was dangerous. It would only attract the wrong kind of attention. He relied on silence, a desperate prayer that he might be overlooked by the larger, faster, and far more lethal creatures that ruled this land. The rules of the wild are absolute, and a blind, abandoned cub is a weakness the ecosystem ruthlessly exploits. It was a matter of hours, not days, before his luck ran out. The natural world has no sympathy for vulnerability, and the harsh lesson of the savanna is that if you cannot contribute, you become a contribution. This devastating reality is what made his survival so precarious, so much a miracle waiting to be broken. The air was thick with the scent of dust and dung, but to Leo, it was also overlaid with the terrifying, musky odor of predators passing too close. He pressed harder against the granite, willing the rough surface to somehow absorb him, to make him invisible to the endless threats of the night. His small claws, still soft and dull, scratched uselessly at the hard stone. The story of Leo, trapped between instinct and despair, is a reminder of the raw, unfiltered drama that plays out every second in the wilderness. Dramas we rarely get to witness. Before we continue this gripping story of survival against all odds, take a brief moment to join our pack. By hitting the subscribe button and leaving a like, you'll help us bring more of these incredible, emotional animal stories to light, giving a voice to the voiceless creatures of the earth. Your support ensures that tales like Leoesi Kamba, told, shared, and remembered, transforming a solitary tragedy into a shared human experience. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Unbeknownst to the small cub, a team of park rangers, led by a kind-hearted man named Daniel, had been patrolling the area for days. They knew the local Lamprey had suffered a recent skirmish with a rogue buffalo bull. This was not a fight for dominance, but a fight for survival, and the buffalo had left devastation in its wake. Daniel and his team were searching for survivors, for injured animals, but their patrols often missed the smallest casualties, the ones that had been knocked far off the pride's path or hidden by a mother's final, desperate act of concealment. The sheer logistics of tracking a cub this small were almost insurmountable. Daniel and his partner, Sarah, drove their dusty, well-worn Jeep along the perimeter, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon. The vastness of the landscape was their enemy. How could they spot a single tawny fur ball against miles of rock and brush? They stopped at a temporary research camp, consulting maps and discussing the futility of their current sweep. Every minute they spent waiting, resting, or searching the wrong direction meant the difference between a rescue and a tragedy. The wind carried their voices away, along with the scent of their vehicle, a blessing that kept Leo hidden for now. But the sheer silence where Leo lay was unnatural, a heavy, suffocating silence that was more terrifying than any roar. His blindness had intensified his other senses, and he perceived the absence of his pride as a black hole of safety. The sun crept higher, and the temperature climbed, baking the small crevice he occupied. Dehydration was now as great a threat as predation. His tongue felt thick and heavy in his mouth, and then the silence broke. It was not the heavy thud of a large predator, nor the grating sound of the ranger's jeep. It was a sound so small, so fundamentally out of place. It took Leo's exhausted mind a moment to process it. A series of light, almost bouncy steps, accompanied by a soft, inquisitive sniff. The sound was accompanied by a subtle shift in the air pressure, indicating something small and low to the ground was moving near the entrance of his rocky hideout. A new scent permeated the hot, dry air. It was a familiar, domesticated scent, yet one Leo's wild instinct did not recognize as a primary threat. It smelled ... friendly. It was Scout. Scout was a tiny 3-month-old mixed-breed puppy, perhaps a distant relative of a jackal, but currently serving as a mascot for a nearby research camp. Scout was impulsive, playful, and possessed a boundless curiosity that often led him into trouble. He had slipped past the camp's flimsy fence during the midday lull, drawn by the scent of a lizard, and had wandered far off the beaten path. He was small, with floppy ears and a coat the color of damp earth, and he approached the massive granite rock not with caution, but with the typical tail-wagging expectation of discovering a new playmate. To Scout, the world was a giant, fascinating ball to be chased, and this large, warm rock smelled vaguely of something interesting and new. Scout's sniff led him directly to the cub. The puppy, oblivious to the fact that he was confronting the prince of the savannah, let out a short, high-pitched woof. It was less a bark and more an invitation, a canine question mark, directed at the lump of tawny fur curled in the shadow. Leo froze, his whole body locked up, muscles taut and ready to spring. Though he had nowhere to go and nothing to fight with, his lack of sight was, paradoxically, his greatest advantage in this moment, preventing him from seeing the sheer absurdity of the situation. He did not know this creature was small and weak. To Liu the wolf was just another unknown sound, a closer, softer threat, and he prepared for the end. He let out a weak, desperate hiss, the sound more pathetic than threatening, a mere puff of air that betrayed his starvation and terror. The hiss carried a warning, an instinctive refusal to surrender, even as his energy reserves plummeted to zero. The sound was the last defiant act of a desperate king. Scout, however, was undeterred. The puppy had expected a response, perhaps a playful growl, but the weak hiss confused him. He tilted his head, the universal sign of canine curiosity, and advanced another inch. He lowered his front paws, wiggling his rear end in a tentative playbow, completely misinterpreting the cub's posture. The puppy's breath, warm and carrying the faint smell of his last meal, a smell that was intoxicatingly foreign and safe to the starving cub, brushed against Leo's sensitive nose. For the first time since his abandonment, Leo felt something other than fear. He felt confusion, a momentary pause in the relentless cycle of panic. Scout, sensing the cub's stillness, took a brave step closer, his tiny tail giving a tentative, hopeful thump against the dry earth. He gently nudged the cub's shoulder with his soft, wet nose, initiating a silent, unforeseen negotiation in the heart of the wild. The blind cub, rigid with terror, now faced a decision more profound than finding food, accepting the impossible kindness of a creature he should have seen, but could only sense as an ally. The world had become a single, warm point of contact for Leo. The soft, wet nose that nudged his shoulder felt like the gentlest form of communication imaginable. It wasn't the sharp bite of a predator, nor the harsh scraping of the wind. It was life, small and uncertain, but present. Scout, the tiny puppy, was an anomaly, a breach in the severe order of the savannah. He nudged Leo again, this time whining softly, a sound of confusion mixed with genuine, innocent concern. Leo's initial rigidity began to melt, replaced by a deep, instinctual pull toward the warmth. He was starved for contact, for the sensation of another beating heart close to his own. He was a creature of the pride, genetically programmed for huddling, for tactile reassurance. And here, in the terrifying silence of abandonment, was a surrogate, a warm body offering an unsolicited truce. He shifted, slowly uncurling his weak body from the safety of the rock. The movement was a profound act of trust, or perhaps simply a surrender to exhaustion. He reached out a small paw, testing the air, and his claws, meant to tear and grip, found only the puppy's smooth fur. Scout reacted not with fear, but with a clumsy, affectionate lick to Leo's chin. In that strange, silent exchange, an impossible pact was formed. Scout, the domesticated wanderer, adopted the blind, royal outcast. The puppy lay down beside the cub, instinctively providing what Leo desperately needed: physical warmth and a cover scent. Scout smelt of humans, of cooked food, and of safety. A powerful cocktail that muffled the terrifying, musky odors of the wild that were Leo's constant nightmare. For the next few hours, under the oppressive midday sun, the two lay intertwined. Scout would occasionally move, licking Leo's face with great care, trying to encourage a response. He seemed to recognize that this furry thing was sick and afraid, not a creature of power. Leo, too weak to protest, simply absorbed the strange, miraculous comfort. His small, clouded eyes remained fixed on nothing. but his twitching ears and nose were completely focused on the puppy's presence. This scene, a tiny dog cuddling a blind lion cub, was a masterpiece of accidental kindness, a complete defiance of the food chain hidden away beneath the massive granite. But the savannah never sleeps, and the defiance of nature never goes unpunished for long. The shadows began to lengthen, and with the cooling air came the activity of the night hunters. The hyena clan was waking up. They were scavengers and opportunists capable of sensing weakness from miles away. The scent of a distressed animal, the faint, panicked odor of a lost cub, was a dinner bell to their sophisticated noses. Daniel and Sarah, meanwhile, were kilometers away, methodically searching the wrong ridge. They had found the site of the buffalo confrontation and were assessing the damage. The Pride moved west. Daniel, Sarah noted, pointing to the disturbed earth. But there's blood here that isn't lion. It's a risk to go back that way. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. We're looking for a needle in a continent, Sarah. If a cub was knocked this far off, it means the mother was desperately trying to hide him. We need to think like a desperate lioness. Where's the best cover? They pulled out their maps, drawing concentric circles around the core conflict zone. Their attention kept returning to the massive granite outcrop, the very rock where Leo lay hidden. It was too far from the main Pride trail, too exposed, yet it was the only substantial piece of terrain that offered complete concealment. They decided to risk a detour, a long, rough drive across untracked terrain. Back at the granite, Scout was growing uneasy. The comforting warmth of the day was giving way to a biting coolness, and the sounds of the night were beginning to emerge. He raised his head, his ears pivoting nervously. He scented it first. A thin, acrid smell that spoke of Trabalda, rank, oily scent of a spotted hyena. A lone hyena, separated from its clan, was running a patrol, sniffing the edges of potential territory. It was large and gaunt, its jaws powerful enough to crush bone. It paused, its head low, its eyes catching the last sliver of the sun's reflection. It had found the trace, the scent of lion, weak and young, mixed with something else, something small and domesticated. The hyena moved with a low, loping gait, its focus absolute. It circled a granite outcrop, getting closer and closer to the hidden crevice. Leo, though blind, was hyper-aware. The puppy's presence was no longer a comfort. It was a distraction, an added layer of vulnerability. The cub's terror returned, sharp and overwhelming. He whimpered, a small, involuntary sound of pure distress. Scout, sensing the massive threat looming over them, reacted not as a domesticated pet, but as a canine protecting his new charge. He knew what that smell meant. He stood up, placing his small body directly in front of Leo. He let out a series of short, frantic yelps, aggressive, and utterly fearless. It was the sound of a puppy attempting to roar. The hyena hesitated, confused by the strange mix of scents and the audacious, tiny bark. It saw a puppy, but it also scented the lion cub. It was an easy meal, but the noise of the puppy could attract a larger predator, or worse, the humans. The hyena took another cautious step. This unexpected standoff, the tiny puppy defending the blind king, was a moment of profound, breathtaking courage. Scout wasn't just guarding Leo. He was signaling his location, sacrificing silence for a chance at being heard. The gamble was enormous. We are reaching the most critical turning point in Leo and Scout's story. Their unlikely bond has thrown them into the direct path of danger. If you find yourself moved by this unbelievable display of courage and friendship, please hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Every subscriber brings more attention to the urgent need for wildlife protection and helps us share more of these incredible rescue stories that change lives, both human and animal. Thank you for being part of the solution and for joining our mission. Just as the hyena coiled, preparing to strike, the low, steady rumble of an engine finally reached the granite outcrop. Daniel and Sarah were close. The sound, though distant, was enough to break the hyena's concentration. Predators fear the jeep. They fear the humans. With a frustrated, clicking sound, the hyena turned and vanished back into the darkening bush, its chance at an easy meal thwarted by a clumsy puppy and an engine. The tension broke, leaving Leo and Scout trembling. But the danger was not truly past. Daniel and Sarah's jeep, bouncing and struggling over the uneven ground, finally pulled up to the enormous rock. They stopped, cutting the engine, and the world fell silent again, except for the heavy thud of their own hearts. Sarah was the first to see them. She lowered her binoculars, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel, Dot, behind the rock. Look. They moved slowly, carefully, not wanting to scare away what they might find. What they saw defied logic and years of field experience. The small, trembling lion cub, severely malnourished, his eyes clearly clouded and blind, was nestled against a tiny, dirty puppy. The cub was seeking comfort from the one creature he should have feared or ignored. Daniel knelt slowly, pulling a protective blanket from his pack. It's the cub, Sarah, and he's blind. Look at his eyes. He's completely blind. The immediate priority was not the puppy, but the dying lion cub. Scout, seeing the large, slow-moving human, began to bark frantically, positioning himself between Daniel and Leo. He was protecting his friend, an instinct stronger than any training. Hold on, little guy, Daniel murmured, gently extending his hand toward Scout first. He was recognized by the puppy's scent as a familiar, if distant, human, and the frantic barking turned into a series of uncertain, defensive whines. Daniel's experienced eye quickly assessed Scout. Healthy, but clearly camp-raised and lost. Sarah gently secured Scout, distracting him with a quick drink of water from her canteen, while Daniel moved in for the critical moment. He carefully scooped up Leo. The cub was shockingly light, skeletal beneath his fur. He was limp and unresponsive, save for a weak attempt to sniff the air. Daniel wrapped him tightly in the blanket, trying to mimic the warmth of a mother's embrace. He's severely dehydrated, maybe a day from collapse, Daniel stated grimly. We need to get him back to the vet team now. The sight of the cub, helpless and sightless, bundled in the ranger's arms, was the devastating culmination of the savannah's cruelty. As Daniel carried Leo toward the jeep, Scout whined and struggled, trying desperately to follow. It was clear that separating them would cause the already traumatized cub further distress. We take the dog too, Sarah decided instantly. He's clearly the only thing keeping the cub calm. We'll sort out the formalities later. For now, they're a unit. The ride back was tense, bumpy, and filled with worry. Leo, nestled on Daniel's lap in the passenger seat, remained completely silent, save for the weak, shallow rise and fall of his chest. Scout, curled up at Leo's feet, occasionally nudged the blanket, emitting soft, reassuring whimpers that seemed to settle the cub. The journey, which felt like an eternity, was a race against time, a final, desperate prayer that the bond forged by necessity would hold long enough for medical science to take over. Upon arrival at the small, sterile research facility, Leo was immediately rushed to the examination table. Dr. Evelyn Hayes, the camp veterinarian, a woman whose calm demeanor hid a fierce determination, was waiting. The first few minutes were a blur of focused, critical actions. 4 lines, glucose checks, and deep, calming breaths from the veterinary team. The initial examination confirmed their worst fears. Leo was roughly 4 weeks old, severely malnourished, and dangerously dehydrated. Dr. Hayes' expression was grave as she shone a small light into the cub's eyes. The cloudy appearance isn't trauma. It's congenital cataracts. Daniel, he was born blind. He never saw his mother, his pride, or the sun. This realization added a new layer of tragic urgency to the rescue. Leo's existence had been one continuous, dark struggle. The vulnerability was absolute. Scout, having been separated briefly for a quick bath and health check, was distraught, pacing anxiously outside the sterile area. When they finally brought him back, placing him gently beside the small cub on the recovery pad, the effect was immediate and astonishing. Leo, who had been shivering despite the warm blanket, calmed instantly. He burrowed his head into Scout's soft, familiar fur, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the blind cub allowed himself to rest, protected by his unlikely, diminutive guardian. The life of the prince of the savannah now rested in the small, unwavering heart of a tiny puppy. Dr. Evelyn Hayes watched the monitor, her face a mask of exhaustion and hope. The first 72 hours of Leo's rescue were a delicate tightrope walk between life and oblivion. His tiny veins, thin as thread, had accepted the fluids and nutrients, but his spirit remained fragile. The critical factor in his stabilization was not the advanced medicine, but the small, brown, furry presence curled at his side. Scout never left him. The moment Scout was placed back next to the cub, the change was profound. Leo, who had been stiff and unresponsive, immediately melted into the puppy's side. Scout became Leo's world, a living, breathing sensory anchor in the cub's unending darkness. The puppy was a constant radiator of warmth, a source of soft sound, and a field of familiar, comforting scent. Dr. Hayes and her team were forced to integrate the puppy into Leo's care routine. When Leo needed to be moved for treatment, Scout followed, whining until he was placed back beside the cub. When Leo was offered milk from a bottle, he often refused, tensing up in confusion. But when Scout was placed near him, the cub would relax, blindly reaching for the bottle, guided by the puppy's gentle nudges and familiar breath. It was as if Scout's presence signaled to Leo's starved brain that this new world, though frightening, was not entirely hostile. As the days turned into a week, Leo began to transform. His skeletal frame filled out, and the downy fur of his cubhood thickened. His energy returned in bursts, tiny, playful swatting motions that often connected with Scout's unsuspecting face. Scout would respond by yipping happily, initiating a clumsy, cross-species game of tag. Navigating the small recovery pen with instinctive grace, Scout had learned to compensate for Leo's blindness, guiding the cub not with sight, but with sound and touch. He would use soft barks to call Leo towards him, and gentle pressure from his body to steer the cub away from obstacles. The bond transcended mere companionship. It was a deep symbiotic relationship. Scout was Leo's eyes, and in return, Leo gave Scout a purpose far grander than chasing lizards. He made the small dog a guardian, a figure of vital importance. Daniel and Sarah, the rangers who had found them, would often visit, mesmerized by the unfolding miracle. They watched one afternoon as Leo, now strong enough to stand and walk, stumbled into the wall. Before a staff member could intervene, Scout, who had been resting, sprang to his feet and ran back to the cub. He didn't try to lead Leo away. He simply stood between Leo and the wall, allowing the lion cub to reorient himself by feeling the puppy's familiar body. "He's not just a companion, Evelyn," Daniel observed, leaning on the observation window. "He's a mobility aid. He's teaching Leo how to be confident in a world he can't see." Dr. Hayes nodded, her professional detachment softening around the edges. "He has the strength to survive now, Daniel, but his congenital cataracts are severe. There is nothing we can do surgically here in the field. He will never hunt, and he will never be integrated back into the wild. The savannah would claim him instantly." The reality of Leo's future was a difficult truth. A wild animal born with such a profound disability must be protected. But where could a blind lion cub and his tiny canine guide go? The team spent weeks researching specialized sanctuaries. They finally located a dedicated wildlife reserve, the Pride Rock Sanctuary, far to the south, managed by conservationists who specialized in permanently disabled, non-releasable apex predators. This wasn't a zoo. It was a vast, tailored environment designed to offer safety, stimulation, and the highest quality of life possible for animals that could no longer live wild. The decision was clear, but it came with one non-negotiable condition from Daniel. Scout must go with Leo. They are two halves of one creature now, he insisted to the sanctuary directors. "Separate them, and you may save the body, but you will destroy the mind." The sanctuary agreed. They understood that the emotional well-being of the animals was paramount, and the sight of the diminutive dog standing guard over the young lion had already captured the hearts of everyone who saw them. The preparation for the journey was meticulously planned to minimize stress. A large, custom-built transport crate was lined with blankets, and the scent of Scout was liberally applied everywhere. On the morning of the transfer, Leo was nervous, pacing and sniffing the air, his anxiety rising with the unfamiliar sounds. Then, Scout was placed in the crate. The moment the puppy's small body touched Leo's side, the pacing stopped. Leo immediately collapsed into his friend, a soft sigh escaping his lips. They curled up together, the lion cub's head resting securely on the puppy's belly, sleeping soundly through the hours-long flight to their new home. The journey was a testament to the power of their Bonda connection, stronger than fear and more stabilizing than any sedative. The Pride Rock Sanctuary was a different kind of kingdom. It was lush, green, and spacious, offering large enclosures designed to mimic natural habitats, but with hidden safety features. Their enclosure was designed with smooth, rounded rocks and pre-planned paths, allowing Leo to learn the layout safely. The first days in the new environment were challenging. Leo, suddenly confronted by new smells, new sounds, and the absence of the familiar research facility, was disoriented. He was clumsy, bumping into things and growing frustrated. Scout, however, took on his duties with renewed vigor. Scout developed an intricate communication system. He would bar once to signal a change in ground texture, two quick yips for an approaching edge, and a steady, low whimper to guide Leo toward the food station. They moved together, a strange, elegant dance of two beings perfectly attuned to each other's needs. As the weeks passed, Leo did not just survive, he thrived. His deafness was a gift in this sanctuary, allowing his other senses to bloom in a way they never could in the terrifying chaos of the wild. He learned to read the temperature of the ground, the subtle direction of the breeze, and the echoes of sound bouncing off the enclosure walls. He navigated his territory with a confidence that astonished the sanctuary staff. He didn't run, he stalked, moving with the quiet, focused intensity of a predator who used his nose and ears as a map. And always right beside him was Scout, The tiny puppy, who should have been nothing more than a plaything for a child, grew into a formidable companion. He tolerated Leo's rough, youthful play, the swatting paws, the clumsy attempts at pouncing with the patience of a saint, knowing when to retreat and when to stand firm. When Leo grew, Scout grew more assertive, his size remaining small, but his role growing immense. Visitors to the sanctuary, observing the two through the protective glass, were always struck by the same thing: the overwhelming normality of their friendship. They shared meals, fought over the best sunspot, and slept nose to nose. The massive golden cub and the small earth-colored dog. Scout was the light in Leo's world, a guide who never let the darkness claim the king. Leo will never feel the wind on the true savannah, nor will he ever lead a wild pride. But he is Safi, surrounded by caretakers who understand his needs, and most importantly, protected by a love that defies the rules of nature. He may be the blind prince of the savannah, but in his new kingdom, he reigns supreme, guided by the most unexpected, subjected tiny puppy named Scout, whose courage behind a rock changed one lion's destiny forever. Their story serves as a profound reminder that connection and kindness can be found in the most unlikely of places, turning a devastating tragedy into a miracle of friendship, proving that the deepest bonds are felt not with the eyes, but with the heart.